This is the issue, and I am the ghetto man. Today's issue, the third plank of the Communist Manifesto, the abolition to all rights to inheritance. Don't go away. We'll be right back. The third plank of the Communist Manifesto calls for the abolition of all rights of inheritance. Karl Marx once stated, if he could sum communism up in a single phrase, it would be the abolition of all private property. In a free society, the acquiring of property as the fruit of a man's labor is paramount in achieving success. Real wealth, once acquired, is the cornerstone to all personal freedom. It is an inalienable right, the fruits of a free person's endeavors, the right to occupy, possess, and control the external things that we own to the total exclusion of any other individual in the universe. Passing one's property, real or personal, to a family member when we die is as old as civilization itself. It is the fundamental, inalienable right of inheritance. The thing that made America the greatest nation on earth was that a person could work, save, build, and acquire an estate for themselves and for their family. An estate that contained the wealth of the family that could be passed down from generation to generation, ensuring that each generation would have a greater opportunity for success than the generation before it. Now, prior to 1913, no one would have thought, especially in the United States of America, that a free sovereign citizen would have to pay an excise tax on their estate before the estate could be transferred to a family member at the time of their death. Since 1802, every time that an inheritance tax was passed, it was almost immediately repealed. The Revenue Act of 1862 and the War Revenue Act of 1898 are good examples of this. Both were repealed shortly after their enactment. So why are we paying an inheritance tax today? What constitutional authority does Congress have to implement an inheritance tax in the first place? Well, the answer to these two questions revolves around the so-called ratification of the 16th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which we discussed in my video, the second plank of the Communist Manifesto. We discovered that the 16th Amendment has never been ratified by 3/4 of the states as required by the U.S. Constitution. We also learned that Philander Chase Knox, the Secretary of State in 1913, falsified the ratification documents in order to secure the ratification of the 16th Amendment. The 16th Amendment is the key in understanding how communism has been injected into our republic. It is also the key to understand how we can rid our nation of its unconstitutional effect. Everything dealing with the communist takeover of our republic revolves around the fraud of the 16th Amendment. It was the fraudulent ratification, or no ratification at all, of the 16th Amendment in 1913 that supposedly granted Congress the power to create a heavy and progressive income tax, the second plank of the Communist Manifesto, which is also the basis of the inheritance tax, the third plank, as well. As we learn reviewing the second plank of the Communist Manifesto, the United States Supreme Court ruled that the 16th Amendment, even if it had been lawfully ratified, did not grant Congress any new taxing powers. You can find this ruling. It's called Brushaber versus Union Pacific Railroad Company. It can be found in Book 240 of the United States Supreme Court Reports on page 1. It's a 1916 case. Okay, since the 16th Amendment did not grant Congress any new taxing powers, in order to get around the direct tax problem, Congress passed the first federal estate tax in 1916, 3 years after the so-called ratification of the 16th Amendment. The constitutional legality of the tax was challenged in 1921. And after making its way through the court system, the U.S. Supreme Court, in a case called New York Trust Company versus Eisner, it's a 1921 case, can be found in Book 256 of the United States Supreme Court Reports on page 345. The court upheld that the federal estate tax was constitutional on the grounds that the estate tax was not constitutionally infirm as a direct tax. Okay, if the estate tax is not a direct tax on an estate, what kind of tax is it? Well, it's the court's opinion that the estate tax is not a direct tax on the property of an estate, but rather an excise tax on the privilege of transferring property at death. Now, you talk about a crock of crap. We're talking about a property right here. A property right is not a privilege. A property right is an inalienable right. All right, let's take a look at Bovier's Law Dictionary. Now, these are the dictionaries that were sanctioned by Congress in 1839 as the official terms and definitions of the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution. So let's take a look at the word property and its definition. Property: the right and interest which a man has in lands and chattels to the exclusion of others. The sole and despotic dominion which one man claims and exercises over the external things of the world in total exclusion of the right of any other individual in the universe. The right to possess, use, enjoy, and dispose of a thing. The judiciary, without any constitutional authority to do so, reduced the inalienable right to acquire, possess, own, and control property to a mere privilege. The inalienable right to transfer one's property after death to whomever you deem fit is a property right, an inalienable right, and cannot be arbitrarily ruled away by the judiciary redefining a property right as a mere privilege. This is insane. Today, when a person dies, the beneficiary has to pay the government 30 to 40% of the value of the estate before he or she can take possession of it. In other words, the beneficiary must buy out the state's interest. Now, if the beneficiary is unable to buy out the state's interest, then the state, who's the real owner anyway, sells the estate, and whatever is left after taxes, the beneficiary gets to keep. And what's interesting is that there is no law prohibiting Congress from raising the inheritance tax rate to even higher percentages. It has been said that the third plank of the Communist Manifesto has not been fully implemented in the United States because the government does not take the entire estate, just a percentage of it. But that's not true. With the enactment of the fifth plank of the Communist Manifesto, which is the private Federal Reserve Central Bank and its fiat currency, until the national debt has been paid off, plus interest, the central bank holds the deed to every piece of private land in this country. Nothing belongs to you, not even your personal property. Well, how can this be? Well, we have monetized our national debt, which means that we use banknotes, bills that represent a portion of the debt owed to the Federal Reserve Bank to circulate as money. Okay, what I'm saying here is that this is a Federal Reserve note. Okay, this is not a dollar. And I'm not going to get into the money issue just yet because we'll cover that in the fifth plank of the Communist Manifesto. We'll cover the money issue. What we have here is a note for nothing. All that this note represents is the amount of money that is owed to the Federal Reserve as our national debt. Okay, this represents that. It's a bill that we owe to them. And we're using what we owe to them as money to purchase as our goods and services. But until the debt has been fully paid off, plus interest, the Federal Reserve still owns everything that you've purchased with this. Make it a little, I'm going to give you another example here. Let's say that you go to a restaurant and you purchase a meal and you eat your meal. And when you're done with your meal, and I'll use this note as an example, the waitress comes over and lays a bill on the table. This bill represents what you owe the restaurant for the meal. Now, if we monetize that bill, what we'll do is we'll take the bill after the waitress lays it on the table. Now that we've monetized this amount of money that we owe the restaurant, and we take this bill up and we offer it, we tender it. The word tender means to offer. We tender it for our meal. And of course, the restaurant takes it, and our meal has been paid with what we owe the restaurant. Now, until we pay the restaurant off entirely, the bill is still owed. We still don't even own the meal. That's how it works. I know it sounds bizarre, but that's exactly what is meant when we say we monetized our debt. Until the entire national debt is paid off, plus interest, nothing that you possess, not your shoes, not your pants, not your shirts, not your computers, your cars, nothing that you possess belongs to you. It all belongs to the central bank. It belongs to the government. And this is how the third plank of the Communist Manifesto works. Now think about that just for a minute. I don't know. Maybe we should start calling ourselves comrades or something. Now in America today, we don't practice the inalienable right to acquire, possess, own, and control our own property anymore. We practice the inheritance tax instead. We practice the third plank of the Communist Manifesto, and we practice it exactly the way Karl Marx outlined it in the Communist Manifesto. I am the Ghetto Man. Thank you for watching. And remember, if you're politically correct, then you're legally wrong. And if you're not part of the solution, then you are the problem. Please subscribe and please follow.